Greetings to all Africans on the continent and across the entire world. This is King Achu from Southern Cameroon and Bazonia. I wanted to discuss about an article that I saw about a week ago. It came out. It was written about a week ago or so. The title of the article is "China Denies City Discriminating Against African Brothers." Beijing, China dismissed on Monday allegations leveled by African and U.S. diplomats that foreigners of African appearance in the city of Guangzhou were being subjected to forceful testing for coronavirus quarantine and ill treatment. They deny all allegations. Meanwhile, there is evidence. There are videos showing how the Chinese are treating Africans in Guangzhou, China. But the Chinese government is denying the fact that that is happening. We all know it is happening. We do not have discrimination in China against African brothers. Yes, you do. You discriminate against Africans. The entire world discriminates against Africans. We know that. So don't tell us that we do not have discrimination in China against African brothers. We know that exists in the whole of Asia, not just China. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian told a Daily News briefing accusing we do not have discrimination in China against African brothers, Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian told Daily News briefing, accusing the United States of trying to exploit the issue to harm Beijing's relationship with African nations. Well, they may be exploiting the issue. The fact is that this is happening. Discrimination against Africans in China is happening. Not only in China, in the whole of Asia. But there's evidence, there's proof with videos showing exactly what the Chinese people are doing to Africans. How they are wrongfully quarantining them and ill treatment on because of the coronavirus. As a matter of fact, the Chinese people have gone as far as saying that the coronavirus was brought in to China by Africans. Meanwhile, the coronavirus started in China. If it was brought in by Africans, then it should have been started somewhere in Africa, but it didn't. Even until now, the amount of people who have coronavirus in Africa is very, very low compared to the rest of the world. But they're trying to still blame everything on us because that's what the world does. They blame everything on Africa, the shithole continent. Because we have shithole leaders. A group of African ambassadors in Beijing had written to China's State Councilor Wang Ying, drawing attention to the discrimination that Africans were encountering in Guangzhou, capital of the southern Guangdong province, after which the U.S. consulate in the city also issued an alert to citizens. So it's not just many African ambassadors had discussion with the Chinese consular about the discrimination. If the discrimination wasn't happening, why are they having discussion about what is going on? You cannot just deny an allegation when there's evidence to prove that something is happening. The alert advised African Americans to stay away from the Guangdong metropolitan area, warning that the city's authorities had told bars and restaurants refused to serve people who appear to be African origin and launched monetary tests and self-quarantine of anyone with African contacts. You see, the thing is, they're not just treating They're not only doing such act to Africans who are coming from the continent. They're doing it to Africans who are also who came from the United States. So it doesn't matter where you come from, so long as you look African, and they even use the word African appearance. So long as you look African, the Chinese people will treat you the same way they treat all Africans. So to the entire black family in the world, the Chinese people do not want Africans in China. And the continent, the African people in the continent must do the same shit to the Chinese, because everything is tit for tat. Everything is an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Everything, you treat everyone the way they treat you. It is a universal law: do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Meaning that if you treat me good, I'll treat you good. If you treat me bad, I will treat you bad. It's as simple as that. That's the universal law. So this is what the Chinese people are doing to Africans, to black people all over the world. Wrongfully quarantining them, denying them access to public places, driving them out of their home when they have paid for their rent. All this style of dehumanization towards black people all over the world. As a matter of fact, it wasn't started by the Chinese. The Chinese is only copying what they have seen by what the West has done to Africans, the West and the Arabs. The blueprint of how Africans should be treated all over the world was made possible by the West and Arabs. So other people in the world are just copying what the West have done. Since they came to Africa, they took slaves from Africans. They made Africans into slaves and took them to the New World. They colonized Africa. Then to today, they still control the resources of Africa. Which is why the Chinese are also in Africa, to control the resources of Africa. And the only stupid thing is that we have fucked up leaders. I know, I'll put it this way, the way that President Trump put it. We have shithole leaders in Africa. Africa is not a shithole. We just have shithole leaders all over Africa. And it doesn't matter if it's the African Arabs, who also treat blacks like slaves, just like the Chinese are treating blacks like slaves. So even in the continent, Africa suffers from outsiders. They go through all type of ill treatment. When would this shit stop? Some say, oh, let's do it like Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, when they hit you on one of your cheeks, you turn the other cheek and then they hit you. But I said no. An eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Life is war. To survive, you must fight. If a Chinese man is beating a black, if a group of Chinese people are beating black people, as we've seen in many videos, coming out from China, do the same thing to them. It's as simple as that. Because what they're doing is war. What they are doing to African people in China is war. They don't see African people as human beings. They see them as things they could exploit and do as they please. So when anybody's put their hands on you in China, and you know that you will not survive if you don't stand for your right, and you know that even if you stand to fight, you will not survive, the best thing to do is to fight back. Even if you're going down, take somebody with you. Africans need to put that in their mind, because the world does not want people that look like me. Africans are unwanted people in the world. Look at what is happening in Brazil. Look at what is happening in Europe. Look at what is happening in the United States and how the police kill so many black people and still go scot-free. Unarmed black people. So the world does not want black people. Despite the fact that the government is saying this about what is happening despite the fact that the United States is saying this about what is happening in China with the black people and the Chinese, they still don't give a shit about black people. It's as simple as that. We are the most unwanted people in the world. Arabs don't want us. As a matter of fact, I could clearly say that even those African Arabs are not wanted by the original Arabs, because if they did, they wouldn't have been in Africa. They would have been in Arab instead of the continent Africa. And they're in Africa. The African Arabs are in Africa and ill-treating black people till today. Modern day slavery continues. But I say this, African people, Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Allah, whatever you believe in, would not come from the sky or from somewhere to save you. You will have to save yourself by organizing and fighting back by any means necessary. By any means necessary. Malcolm X put it best. By any means necessary, we must unite, mobilize, and work together, because this is for the interest of our survival. The Chinese don't want Africans in Africa. Then they should leave from Africa. And if they don't want to leave, then the Africans in Africa should make them leave. Many of the African leaders are speaking out and even saying that the Africans in China should return home. They should. But the African leaders who are incapable of leading Africa must step down. And if they don't want to step down, then the people must use this as a way to kick them out, because the only way forward is a united state of Africa. One continent, one people, standing together for the survival, because we are the most unwanted people in this world. It's as crystal clear. Many Africans in the past have spoken for a United States of Africa, have died for the United States of Africa. And we must do our part as Africans, from West Africa to Central Africa to East Africa to Northern Africa and to Southern Africa. We must do our part to make sure that the entire continent rise and become a great continent for the people of Africa. We cannot continue to depend on any other races. We cannot depend on the West for our survival. We cannot depend on the East for our survival. We Africans must depend on ourselves. Denying any such discrimination, the foreign ministry spokesperson reiterated that China treats all foreigners equally. If they treat all foreigners equally, as I said, with all the evidence of what Chinese people are doing to Africans, I guess that's a new way of treating Africans equally. By beating them up, by throwing them out of their homes that they have paid for, by forcefully quarantining them when they don't have illness or illnesses. And you say you treat Africans equally or foreigners equally. I guess that's a new way of treating foreigners equally. It is irresponsible and immoral for the U.S. to sow discord, Zhao said. It's an attempt to drive a wedge between China and Africa and will never succeed. The Chinese people are doing what they're doing to Africa based on the fact that they want to survive and thrive. The Chinese will do this stuff, this act, such evil act in China and in the continent. Some African leaders were saying, oh, the Chinese are our new friends. No, they were our foes from the beginning. They were our enemies from the beginning. They never had any interest in treating us equally. No other nation in the world has any interest in treating Africa equally. They want to put Africa in a position where they can control, they can dominate. But only through a United States of Africa, only when the people of Africa have realized that they must stand together as one to rise up and be a great continent for the people of Africa. That's when the potential of Africa will be realized. It's not by those 54 countries that we have in Africa. Africa is one huge piece of land, but it's divided in 54 states and possibly 55 with Southern Cameroon coming up, and Bazonia, with possibly 55 with Southern Cameroon fighting for their own independence. But all those states, all those 54, 55 states has weakened, and it will keep the continent Africa weak for generation and generation to come. And so long as we don't realize that unity is the key to our survival, then so many Africans would die and nothing would change. The United States is not trying to wedge or drive a wedge between China and Africa. China is doing that on its own. And the United States is also doing that on its own. Because they have to do that because they benefit that way. Divide and conquer and exploit. That's what the West does. That's what the East does. That's what Arabs do. Using those African Arabs in the continent to drive a wedge so that they can exploit and control Africa. Using the fact that some African countries are Muslim countries to divide and to create a wedge so that they could use that for their own advantage. Multiple ways of making sure that Africa is not united and strong. It's not just one. There are many ways that is at work to make sure that Africa stays divided and conquered. The ambassador's note highlighted a number of reported incidents, including the Africans were being ejected from the hotels in the middle of the night, having their passports seized, and threatened with a revocation of visa and deportation of arrests. Ghana's foreign ministers and the leader of Nigeria's lower house of parliament have also separately met with Chinese ambassadors to their respective countries last week about the reports of mistreatment of Africans in Guangzhou. Why are all the African foreigners and ministers doing this if something negative and cruel is not going on within African people in China? Why are they meeting for all this and having discussion with the Chinese government? It is because that is happening. But the Chinese would deny all. They would deny all claims and say nothing is happening. We're treating African citizens or African people, the African people in China, with respectfully, which is it's not. We know that it's not. Zhao did not directly comment on the ambassador's note, but said that Guangdong has rolled out new measures and that Beijing is working with the relevant African nations to resolve the issue. He did not elaborate on what the new measures were. Having largely stamped out in country country transmission of coronavirus, authorities in China are worried that one of the biggest risks of a second wave in the epidemic stems from for infected people coming from abroad. Imported cases of the virus have largely involved Chinese citizens returning home. So the Chinese citizens who are returning from other places are the one also bringing back the disease in China. Yet they claim that it was the Africans that brought the coronavirus to China. On Sunday, China reported 108 new cases, the most in almost 6 weeks. Over 90% were imported cases, of which Chinese returning from Russia accounted for about half. Africa, we must wake up to the truth, to the reality, and accept the fact that we are the most wanted people in the world. It doesn't matter where we are in the world. It doesn't matter that some are in the United States, or some are in Brazil, or some are in Europe, or some are in whatever they are. The same treatment is deemed possible among all Africans. We are unwanted, and the world will treat us with such hatred. It was the United States that said black people are 3/4 of a human being, that they're not fully humans. Slavery, colonization, all this system that was started more than 400 years ago still shows today. It's still applicable today. And it will be applicable continuously until the African people take a bold step and unite and make Africa, the continent, great for all Africans. This is King Angel. Till next time.